Archimedes removed his hands from his face and wiped away his tears. He looked at the paper on the floor, wondering if he really saw what he thought he saw. No, the image on the paper has not changed. The photo was of his ex-wife and a tall man smiling for the camera. It looked like the photo was taken at a party, probably where the engagement mentioned in the caption was announced. Arch hadn't seen Dee in over 3 years, but she still looked good. Despite the depression and stress caused by the divorce, the years had been kind to her. She seemed to be trying to get her life back on track after the divorce, unlike him, as he threw himself into work, avoiding social situations for longer than he cared to remember. Leaning back in his chair, Arch ran a hand through his hair, which was now grayer than it had been 3 years ago, and sighed. It was a blow to his system. Although he didn't believe he could get back together with Dee after everything they'd been through, he assumed she, like him, was holding on to some hope of reconciliation, no matter how slim it might be. Looks like he was wrong. Dee seemed to move on while he remained where he was, feeling sorry for himself. Not being one to become more depressed than he already was, Arch decided it was time for a change, a long overdue change in his life. He picked up the paper and tossed it into the wastebasket next to his desk. After finishing his last sip of coffee, he prepared to start his day. He needed to talk to his assistant and secretary first thing in the morning. It's time to start delegating more and trusting his team to do what he paid them to do. It's also time to pull your head out of the sand and get back to the way it was. It took some time for Arch to redistribute his workload across the team to feel like they were working at full capacity, and he was able to start reducing his hours in the office. He was proud of his men and how they handled the new tasks he assigned them, but he expected nothing less. They were smart, well-trained people and, to be honest, underutilized because he didn't use them for the purposes they were hired for. Well, this won't happen anymore, Arch promised himself. From now on, his people would be closely involved in the day-to-day affairs of his office, and he would provide guidance as he should have all along. A few weeks after Arch's reforms, he was sitting in the cafeteria of the medical center, where he worked when he noticed his old friend, Bernie Green, walking inside. Bernie had been married to Dee's sister, Deborah, for 2 years. God, has it really been that long? Arch waved at Bernie and invited him to join him. Bernie, how are you? How's Deborah? Great, Arch. Deborah is fine, thanks. How are you? I'm fine, Bernie. I'm getting better now that I've finally gotten my head in order. You know what I mean. Unfortunately, I know. I was worried about you. You work too hard and too long. You don't want another heart attack, right? No, Bernie, one was enough, thank you. I mostly follow the doctor's orders, except for the long hours, of course, but that has changed too, so I'm sure he'll be delighted at the next appointment. Glad to hear it, Arch. Deborah and I were worried about you. Oh, really? Arch said with a wry smile. I felt like I wasn't one of the people Deborah cared about, especially after the divorce. Bernie blushed with embarrassment. You know how it is, Arch. Deborah and Dee are very close. Over time, she calmed down and realized that Dee was mostly to blame. How nice of her, since it was Dee who was in bed with another man, Arch said with tension. I'm sorry, Bernie, but even after all this time, her cheating on me after everything I did to support her still pisses me off. I understand, Arch, although I would like you to talk to someone about this. You can't carry a grudge for so long, it's bad for your health. Do you think I bear a grudge? I rarely think about Dee these days. Only at such moments, when the conversation turns to her, old memories emerge. I loved her, Bernie, loved with all my heart. Thought we'd grow old together. When it turned out that, because of her physical problems, we wouldn't have children, I was just as devastated as she was, but it wasn't clear from what she said, and neither was Deborah's. I was a devoted and loving husband for 12 years while she was in therapy, and then as she drifted away from me day after day. Did you know she scolded me for trying to throw her 40th birthday party? Bernie's eyes widened at that comment. No, I didn't know that. Oh yes, I was stunned to say the least, but I apologized and didn't bring it up again. But the cold in our marriage only grew stronger. We were two people living in the same house, but there was no marriage as such. We could have been brother and sister, given the lack of intimacy in the last 2 years. I tried everything I could to bring her back to me, Bernie, I really did. But how much can one person do when another doesn't even try? I had doubts about the viability of the marriage even before the affair, so finding her with another man was the latest in a long series of events that should have told me the marriage was over. My only regret is that it took a heart attack to wake me up from the stupor I had been in for years. Arch was exhausted talking about it. He hadn't realized it would take so much energy out of him, and his shoulders sagged as he stared at his plate, no longer feeling hungry. Bernie put his hand on his friend's shoulder and squeezed it. Sorry, Arch, I didn't know. No one really knows unless Dee told them. I didn't want to talk about it, and I still don't, but I felt like you deserved to hear the other side of the story, because I'm sure you heard Dee's side. I admit I heard, but being in my place, I knew that there was more than I heard, because in any dispute there are two sides. I hope you don't get mad, but I have to ask, do you still love her? Arch paused and took a deep breath, letting it out through his teeth before answering. I asked myself the same question. Do I love her? To be honest, I would say yes, I still love her. We had good years together. There just weren't enough of them, and the bad years outweighed the good ones. The thing is, although I still love her, I'm not in love with her, you know. I love her like a friend who has been away for a long time. I remember the good times we had and sometimes wonder what happened. But she was gone so long ago that all the feelings of being in love are long gone. Besides, it doesn't matter. She's engaged now, right? I remember seeing an ad in the newspaper some time ago. Bernie smiled, wondering if his information would change Arch's attitude towards Dee. Well, Arch, I have news on this matter. Dee changed her mind. She was fascinated by the guy, but when it came down to it, and she realized that she would have to live in England, she called off the engagement. Deborah questions her sanity because the guy was rich, and he seemed really into Dee. He was devastated when she called off the engagement, but he accepted it. He returned to England. Arch mused, well, that changes a lot, doesn't it? He then continued his thoughts. Why should it change? Just because she's not engaged, and that was the catalyst that got me out of my funk. It doesn't change the fact that I'm tired of Dee and all her depression and all her other problems all these years. She may truly regret the affair, and she may even be normal now, but how long will that last? She had treatment and medication last time, and she seemed normal then, so what happened then? No, sorry, I've already been through this and learned my lesson. Arch realized that he had been silent for too long, so he caught his friend's gaze and responded. Sorry, Bernie, but I'm glad to hear it. Dee deserves to be happy, and I was glad to hear that she was moving forward in her life. I hope she doesn't give up. She's a good woman if she's truly healthy, and she deserves to be happy just as much as anyone else. I was hoping that you might be interested in getting back together with her when you find out she's not getting married. No, I'm sorry, Bernie, but sometimes love just isn't enough. I have exhausted all the love I had for her in the last 12 years of our marriage. Besides, despite what she may say or even believe, she has not been able to love me in recent years. If she had been in love, she would have asked for a divorce before she decided to have an affair. Bernie looked shocked by Arch's statement. How can you say that, Arch, Dee has always loved you? Come on, Bernie, you're a psychiatrist. Maybe I'm stubborn, but I don't see any love for my husband in bringing another man into my bed, especially into our bed in the house we share. At the very least, she could take the guy to a hotel. No, she didn't even bother to show me that much respect. She didn't care that she brought a man to our house. She didn't care that she brought a man to our bed. She didn't care that there was even a remote possibility that I might come home and find her in the arms of another man. No, this is not love. This is a complete disregard for the feelings of the person you married. This is indifference to his feelings. It's taking perverse pleasure from the possibility of getting caught, no matter how small that probability may be, and throwing the affair in the husband's face. This tells me that she weighed the chances of getting caught against the consequences, and found the chance to be so small or so insignificant that she didn't care if she got caught. To me, it shows such disrespect for me that there was no love. Sorry, Bernie, but it's over between me and Dee. Bernie sat back in his chair, stunned. It was obvious that Arch had been thinking about this for a long time and had come to some interesting and probably valid conclusions. He had counseled enough troubled couples to understand how a man could conclude there was no love if his wife could do so. Considering the many years of support that Arch gave to his wife through all her problems and illnesses, it is not surprising that he felt this way. He looked at his friend sympathetically. I understand what you're saying, Arch, and I see that you've thought about this for a long time. If it means anything, I agree with you in principle. The actions you describe are definitely not an expression of love for your spouse. I think there are some mitigating circumstances in Dee's case, but it's up to you to decide whether those circumstances can outweigh the pain you obviously felt from her betrayal. That's the thing, Bernie. Although things weren't great in our marriage, and haven't been for many years, I never thought that she would have an affair. I didn't think she was even interested in sex, for God's sake. But even with all the negativity between us, I never thought she would hurt me like this. Seeing her in the arms of another man killed any love I had for her, and certainly any possibility of forgetting what happened. In all these years, I have never been tempted to seek solace outside of our marriage. I loved Dee too much for that, and took my vows in sickness and in health, seriously. Dee needed me, and I was there for her. Even when she seemed normal, I was there, hoping that the sweet, loving, fun woman I married would come back to me, but that never happened. Even in my darkest hours, I never thought about cheating, and I had opportunities. I couldn't do it. It was wrong, damn it. It just wasn't right. Arch's voice trailed off, and he sagged in his chair, his emotions taking over, and he was left devastated. I'm really sorry, Arch. I'm glad you told me about all this. It sheds light on some questions I've had for a long time. You know that Dee came to me after the divorce, and I can't discuss what we talked about, of course, but if it means anything, Dee herself doesn't know why she did it, although I have some theories. Dee loved you and still does, but she knows she hurt you, and I don't think she even realizes how much. I won't bring up Dee again, Arch, but I had to try. Deborah asked me to. She wanted you to know how Dee felt and still feels. Your decision not to talk to her or open her messages made Deborah think you were stubborn. Arch's head snapped up and Bernie raised his hands in a calm gesture. I know that's not true, Arch. I know you, and you're not a stubborn person, and after what you told me, I'm even more sure of it. I really wish things had turned out differently for you and Dee, but I understand your position. You won't hear from me on this topic again. Thanks for listening, Bernie. This is the first time I've talked about this in such detail. I feel much better now that I've expressed this. Bernie smiled at his friend and said, Hey, no problem. What else are friends for? By the way, my invoice will be in the mail. Arch chuckled. You know, considering how good I feel now, I might cry. He looked at his plate and, taking a fork, began to eat his lunch, realizing that he was hungry. Talking to Bernie did more than ease Arch's mind. It made him think about his decision not to talk to Dee or have any contact with her. He avoided her to protect himself. He knew that if he met her, he would say something he would regret later, and he didn't want to do that. He also didn't want to deal with her making excuses for his behavior. What difference does it make what the reasons for the affair were? Ultimately, she deliberately decided to bring a man into their home and have sex with him in their bed. As much as he loved Bernie as a person, he would have been uncomfortable with the usual psychoanalytic excuses. Listening to her explain, or worse, according to Bernie, what she couldn't explain, would bring up all the old wounds and make him relive the incident, something he never wanted to do. So, to protect his heart, he stopped all contact with Dee except through their lawyers. This, of course, was 3 years ago. Is it time to finally talk to Dee? Perhaps, but he needed to think about it for a while longer. A couple of weeks later, Arch sat in a secluded booth at his favorite new restaurant, waiting for his ex-wife. For the umpteenth time since he left a message on her voicemail at work to meet him today in the evening, he wondered how wise it was to invite her to dinner. Does he really want to meet her face to face in such an intimate place? Doesn't he send the wrong signal by doing this? Will she show up at all? Just as he began to drown in what-if scenarios, the hostess brought Dee to the table. Like a true gentleman, he stood up to greet her. "Dee, thank you for coming. I hope you didn't have any problems finding this place," he said, pulling out a chair for her. As she sat down, Dee blushed, remembering how much she enjoyed Arch's company and how much she had missed him all these years. "You're welcome, Arch. Thank you for the invitation. This is a very nice place. Is it new?" "Yes, it opened a year or two ago. I really like it. The food here is great, and the tables are positioned so you can have a private conversation without fear of other diners hearing every word." Dee wondered if there was anything Arch would like to tell her in private. But it didn't matter at the moment. Dee also had an agenda regarding this meeting, and she decided to get down to business right away. "Arch, I'm so sorry. Please, I didn't invite you here for this. I've thought about a lot of things for a long time, and I know you're sorry. The woman I married would have been, and although there have been many changes in our lives, I don't think you have changed so much. Thank you for your trust, Arch. You're right, we both changed a lot, before and after the divorce. I want you to know that I take full responsibility for everything that happened. I really appreciate it, Dee. I want you to know that I don't need an explanation for the incident that led to our divorce. I've come to terms with it and don't want to open old wounds. I want to talk about why I invited you here tonight. I still feel like I have to explain myself, Arch. Please, Dee, he said a little harsher than he intended. Taking a calming breath, Arch continued. I don't want an explanation. This is all in the past, and we both need to put it behind us. We can't continue to live in the past, and that's why I invited you tonight. I want us to be friends again. Dee's heart began to beat faster at Arch's last statement. Friends? In what sense? Friends, nothing more. We had many years together, and while not all of them were good, some were, and there is no reason why two adults with our history couldn't be friends. I may have done the wrong thing by cutting off all contact as I did, but I can't change that. All I can do is make things better now and in the future. Can we be friends again, Dee? Arch leaned back and waited for her answer. Dee looked down at her plate and then looked back at Arch through her eyelashes. Tears sparkled in her eyes and her throat tightened. She never thought Arch would ever say those words to her. She was sure that because of her actions she had lost all possibility of communication with him, and now to be invited into his friendship was more than she could have hoped for. She swallowed back tears twice before she could speak. I would really like that, Arch. I wish we could be friends again. I hoped for this, but I never thought it would come true. I'm so glad you decided to offer this to me. I'm stunned but honored. I'm probably more of a monster than I thought, if that's what you think. I never stopped loving you, Dee. I'm just not in love with you anymore. I hope we can start a new relationship as good friends. I value your feelings, Arch, and although my actions do not align with my feelings, I have never stopped loving you. I also want to start a new relationship with you, like very good friends. She noticed that Arch had already poured the wine before she arrived, so she raised her glass to propose a toast, to good friends. Arch raised his glass and also smiled, to good friends. They clinked their glasses, took a sip of wine, and, taking the menu, plunged into conversation. Even though they hadn't spoken to each other for 3 years, the conversation soon became as pleasant as it used to be before all the problems in their marriage. All too soon, dinner and dessert were eaten, and it was time to go home. Arch pulled out a chair for Dee and took her hand. I had a very pleasant evening, Dee. To be honest, I was a little scared. I thought tonight would be awkward, and it was for a while, but once we settled in, it was almost like old times. Can I walk you to your car? Dee smiled and squeezed Arch's hand before letting go. Thank you, good sir. I was also worried about how the evening would go, but I had to try it, and I'm very glad I did. Thank you for the offer of friendship, Arch. It is an offer I will always value, as will your friendship. Arch walked Dee to her car and waited for her to start the engine, then turned to walk to his car, thinking the evening had gone well. Arch sat in his chair at the board meeting, staring into space. Mr. Joe Brumbley, the CFO, was retiring and talking about his years working at the medical center. Although Arch really loved Joe, he had always been a talker, and today he really fell apart. He went on and on about his career and all the wonderful people he worked with. He had just gotten to the 1960s and Arch was bored to tears. Mainly as a man, he tried his best to concentrate, and thanks to the CEO, Joe sped up his memory journey, completing it in record time. Everyone thanked Joe warmly for everything he had done for them, and he sat down to a standing ovation from his colleagues. The last item on the agenda was introducing Joe's successor. Although Arch participated in the initial interviews and the candidates' second and third interviews, he did not know the final selection. The CEO, Bill Corrigan, wanted to keep this part of the process for himself after reviewing his staff's recommendations. All three candidates had outstanding qualifications. One was even the CFO of a smaller regional medical center in the state. Based on his assessments of the candidates, he had no doubts about any of them, so he was not concerned about Bill's choice. However, if asked for his personal opinion, he would vote for the only woman in the group, Elizabeth Cann. Elizabeth's qualifications were as good as those of the other applicants, and she passed the interview with flying colors, exuding confidence in herself and her abilities. She had truly innovative ideas on cost control, which is always a controversial topic in healthcare. What really attracted Arch to the idea of becoming the new CFO was her intelligence. She had a quick wit that showed after the last formal interview when they chatted before her next meeting. Arch had not had such pleasure from communicating with a woman for many years. Of course, it didn't hurt that Elizabeth was an attractive woman. She seemed about his age. He estimated between 45 and 50 years old, with black hair. Judging by the few gray hairs, it looked like the color was completely natural, which is rare in a woman her age. She was quite tall, an inch or two shorter than him in her heels, with a normal but curvy figure. But what attracted Arch most was her smile. She smiled easily and often, but never seemed frivolous. At least in Arch's opinion, she would be a great addition to their current team some. Arch's thoughts were interrupted when Bill made the announcement everyone had been waiting for. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank all of you for your assistance in making the decision to replace Joe. I would also like to thank Joe again for his kind offer to stay on for an additional month and be available for consultation for 3 months to help his successor settle into his new role. Modest applause was appreciated by Joe before Bill continued. Although the selection of Joe's replacement was difficult, this was not due to your efforts. This is purely due to the quality of the candidates. I did not want to turn down any of them. However, a choice had to be made. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our new Chief Financial Officer, Elizabeth Cann. Elizabeth was waiting for her signal in the adjoining office, and as she entered, she glanced around at the crowd. She really wanted the position, had worked hard to get it, and was now ready to take on the challenge she was ready for. She also wanted to work at a downtown medical center for many years. Their reputation as one of the best institutions in the state was well known. He had a reputation for hiring the best in the business, and she was the best in her opinion, so she knew she could succeed here. If she was honest with herself, she was also excited to work with Arch Meter. Of all the people who interviewed her, she enjoyed this interview the most. In addition, she found him a very attractive man, intelligent, and a very pleasant conversationalist. Oh yes, she will really like this job. Thank you, Bill. I want to say that I appreciate your choice and look forward to working with Joe and gaining all the knowledge I can from him. Addressing Joe directly, she continued, Joe, I thank you in advance for your time, and I promise that I will draw on your knowledge so actively that you will have a headache by the time we're done. Joe and the rest of the staff laughed at her words. Then she took the chair Bill pointed her to and sat down. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to remind you that Joe's going-away party is Friday night at the Hilton at 8 p.m. This is a formal event, so wear your best clothes and get ready for an evening of dinner and dancing. The meeting is declared closed. Bill's staff began to file out of the room, shaking hands and congratulating Elizabeth on her new position. Arch delayed to leave second to last. Congratulations, Elizabeth. Welcome to the team. I'm really looking forward to working with you. Please feel free to contact me for advice. My office is always open. Thank you, Arch. I will do so. I'm sure we will work closely together in the future, and I'm looking forward to that too. She smiled and looked Arch in the eyes as she said this. Me too, Elizabeth. Arch fidgeted nervously, but decided to move on. Besides this being too presumptuous, would you mind letting me escort you to your going-away party? You're new in town and all. Wow, he's not wasting any time, is he? Thought Elizabeth. If it had been anyone else, I probably would have refused, but I have good feelings for Arch. I wouldn't mind finding out what he's up to. Thank you, Arch. I would be glad. I haven't had much time to get the hang of it, so your suggestion is very helpful. Great. We'll finalize plans later this week. Sorry, but I have an appointment. We'll talk later. With these words, Arch left the room, leaving Elizabeth and Joe alone. Arch is a great guy. It will be a great help to you in the future. Why don't we go to my office, excuse me, your office, and get to know the staff? Elizabeth smiled and patted Joe's hand. Joe, this is still your office and your staff, and I don't want you to think otherwise. I'm really looking forward to working with you in the coming weeks. You have an excellent reputation in our industry, and I want to do my best to learn what you know to improve myself. Just do everything you can to make this medical center great, and do it honestly, and you will succeed. This is what I have always done, and it has served me well. I'm sure it will help you too. With that, they headed to Joe's office for their first meeting with the new staff. The farewell party was a great success. Joe and his wife enjoyed the attention and praise of their colleagues throughout the evening, and there wasn't a dry eye as Joe thanked everyone for the wonderful years they had spent together. Thanks to his investment, Joe and his wife were leaving next month for a trip around the world, something they had been planning to do for years, although he would be available for consultation when he returned if Elizabeth needed help, which Joe had no doubt about. In the week they'd worked together, she'd handled the job as easily as anyone he'd ever known, and he planned to start backing off and letting her take over starting Monday. The transition promised to be easy, and he made sure Bill knew it. Bill seemed pleased with this information and commented that his instincts had never failed him before. Bill noticed that his new CFO and Koo were getting along well. He saw them talking and laughing easily all evening. He saw them dancing together, although Elizabeth danced with other members of his team, as did Arch. It was nice to see his staff interact well in such a social setting. However, he was no fool. He could see the beginnings of a spark between Elizabeth and Arch. Elizabeth was an attractive woman that any man would be proud to know. Arch was a handsome man, that much was clear, and they made a handsome couple. To be honest, he was glad to see Arch so happy this evening. After the divorce, Arch was a reserved person. He was not the same Arch that Bill had known since his divorce. He was a reserved person, reluctant to interact with others outside of a work environment. Instead of socializing, Arch started working more and more, although that finally changed recently. Bill even tried to interest Arch in social activities by inviting suitable ladies to corporate functions, but no one could interest Arch. Then, 5 or 6 months ago, Arch seemed to awaken from his stupor and was slowly returning to his old self. Some careful investigation revealed that Arch and his ex-wife had settled their differences and agreed to become friends again. Although he, like Arch's other friends, hoped that Arch and Dee would reconcile, this did not happen. Although Bill was well aware of why this happened, he never insisted on it, and was therefore pleased that the two decided to settle on friendship rather than the impasse that had lasted for the past 3 years. While he wasn't sure Elizabeth would be the best match for Arch, he would need to get to know her a lot better to make that decision. It was nice to see Arch showing some interest in the woman. He needed to keep an eye on this budding romance to make sure that if anything went wrong, it wouldn't affect his team. He wouldn't want to lose one or both of them because they couldn't work together. However, it was too early for such worries because accompanying a woman to a party and a few dances does not mean romance. Elizabeth smiled at her companion as they approached her apartment. "Thank you for accompanying me to the party tonight, Arch. I had a very pleasant time. You are a good dancer." "Thank you, Elizabeth. You too. You really impressed your colleagues today. I kept hearing good things about you from everyone. You didn't look like a newbie at all." Arch smiled. "I don't know what it is, but I feel so comfortable here with my staff and the rest of Bill's team. It feels like we've been working together for years. The husbands and wives of the other employees are also very kind and helpful, almost like a big family. Bill tries to maintain this atmosphere and carefully selects people to fit into this model. I think it makes the work environment much better. That doesn't mean Bill can't be strict when he needs to be, but I think he has to do it less often than many other directors because of his careful selection of people." Arch noticed that they were approaching her door and stepped back a little. "Well, here we are. Thank you for allowing me to accompany you tonight, Elizabeth. See you on Monday." Elizabeth inserted the key into the lock and opened the door slightly. "No, Arch, thanks to you. I had a very good time and enjoyed your company. See you on Monday." With these words, she entered her apartment, closing the door behind her. As the months passed, Elizabeth eased into the role of CFO, just as Joe had predicted. She was able to improve on the foundations Joe had laid, making many policy changes that increased corporate profits while maintaining the high standards for which the company was famous. Elizabeth and Arch grew closer during this period due to their close working relationship. They had lunch together several times a week and dinner after long work meetings. They talked mostly about work-related matters, but as often happens in such situations, personal information gradually crept into their conversations. He found out that she had been divorced for 10 years, and Arch mentioned that his divorce happened almost 4 years ago. Arch was surprised to learn that Elizabeth did not have children, her husband did not want them, and he himself did not clarify why he did not have children. As Arch noted during her interview, they had a lot in common. He felt very comfortable in her presence. He didn't think he was in love with her, not the way he was with Dee when they first met, of course, but he was very happy to be with her and looked forward to seeing her when they were apart. Elizabeth, on the other hand, wondered what was holding Arch back. He seemed to be happy with her and enjoyed her company as much as she did him, but he never took their relationship to the next level. They didn't have dates, they only met as friends. At first, she thought he might be reluctant to pursue a romantic relationship with a coworker because of the potential problems at work if things went wrong. She wondered whether there might be a company policy against fraternization among executives. She even checked with the HR director, who assured her there was no such policy. After talking with colleagues, she learned that Dr. Bernie Green was closest to Arch and could probably shed some light on his situation. One day she saw Bernie in the cafeteria and, noticing that he was alone, approached his table. "Dr. Green, can I sit down?" asked Elizabeth. Bernie Green looked up to see the tall brunette he had seen with his friend Arch standing by his desk. He stood up and motioned for her to take the empty seat. "Please have a seat, Miss Can. I don't think we've met yet. I see you know who I am. That's flattering." "Miss Can, your reputation precedes you. Everyone is talking about the new CFO and her innovative ideas." Elizabeth smiled shyly. "Please call me Elizabeth. I didn't know that my fame had spread so widely. I am very pleased to hear that. I hope I don't seem too narcissistic." "No, and call me Bernie. To paraphrase Walter Brennan from the old TV show, no bragging, just the facts." "You have a lot to be proud of, Elizabeth, and you deserve credit, if my opinion means anything. I remember Walter Brennan, but I don't think I've seen the show. I appreciate your words, Bernie. Everyone here is so nice, and you continue that tradition." Bernie knew that this meeting was not all about mutual compliments and decided to get to the point. "While it's nice to compliment each other, I have a feeling you want to talk about something else, right, Elizabeth?" Elizabeth was confused. Was I that obvious, Bernie? "Yes, I really wanted to talk to you about something, or rather, about someone. about Arch Meter. I heard that you are his best friend here and was wondering if you could shed some light on his situation. I'll try, but there are some things I can't discuss due to doctor-patient confidentiality. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow at this information. Was Arch a patient? No, his ex-wife Dee. But I have a feeling that what you want to know about may concern information that includes Dee, and I can't discuss specific details in that area. I completely understand, Bernie. Since you know why I'm here and what interests me, I'll get straight to the point. I like Arch, but he seems to be holding back. We're good friends, at least I think so, but I'd like to be more than friends, and it's not that he doesn't want to, but he doesn't pick up on my hints about moving forward. Can you clear this up? Bernie paused to consider Elizabeth's comments. He needed to tread carefully. He wanted Arch to find someone new, since reconciliation with Dee was out of the question, but he didn't want to give away unnecessary information. I'm sorry if I seem reluctant to answer, Elizabeth, but this is a delicate matter. Arch is one of my best friends, but the same can be said about his ex-wife. I don't want to harm any of them, and what you want to know could be harmful in the wrong context. Before we continue, I want you to promise that nothing we talk about today will be repeated to no one, even Arch. Elizabeth reached out and patted Bernie's arm in solidarity. I completely understand, Bernie, and I will never divulge anything you tell me in confidence. I'd appreciate any insight you can provide, but I also don't want you to feel uncomfortable. If you need to miss something, that's not a problem. Okay, then I believe Arch doesn't want to get too involved with any woman, not just you, because he still has feelings for his ex-wife that he can't leave behind. He's not in love with her, he told me that in person, but they were married for 20 years, and he really loved her, and those kinds of feelings take time to subside. There had been problems in the marriage leading up to the divorce, but the catalyst had come so suddenly that Arch had not had time to come to terms with the idea that he was no longer married to Dee. For the first 3 years after the divorce, he was a workaholic, isolating himself from all social activities that he could. It wasn't until recently, in the last 6 months or so, shortly before you joined the company, that Arch and Dee actually talked to each other. They agreed to be friends, and for the most part, it suited them both. So, if you look at it this way, Arch has only been divorced for the last 6 months, and he's probably not ready for, or even looking for, a new relationship. I see, this really clarifies some points. Arch's actions make more sense now. When he said that he had been divorced for almost 4 years, I assumed that he was already over it, or almost over it ill. He must have really loved his ex, right? Yes, I loved it. They were one of the happiest couples I have ever known for the first 8 years of their marriage. Problems began to appear slowly, and Arch, believing in the sanctity of marriage, did not want to give up. The next 12 years had more ups and downs than most marriages, but Arch stood firm and worked to improve their relationship. I don't want to make it sound like it was all Dee's fault. She had and still has her own issues that I can't discuss, but Arch loved her enough to accept a lot to make sure their marriage survived. As I said, then a moment came that Arch said he couldn't accept, and they divorced. So, in the end, he still loves her, but is no longer in love with her. They seem to be good friends now, and given the circumstances, this is great progress for both of them. Elizabeth considered what she had heard. Arch's actions, or rather lack thereof, were now more understandable. Bernie cleared up quite a few questions for her, the main one being her feeling that Arch wasn't interested in her as anything more than a friend. She now knew that Arch probably didn't want to pursue another romantic relationship while he was still dealing with his divorce. Since her own divorce happened 10 years ago, and she had no interest in other men she had dated, she decided to give Arch the time he needed and see how things would unfold. Thanks for the information, Bernie. I really appreciate it. I want you to know that I will not say a word to anyone about our conversation and that you have truly eased my doubts regarding Arch. If you don't mind, I'd like to invite you to lunch as a thank you for what you did today. I'm treating you. Bernie smiled widely. I agree, Elizabeth. I am a married man, but I cannot refuse lunch offered by a beautiful woman. The weeks turned into months, and Arch and Elizabeth grew even closer as friends. Arch often invited Elizabeth to various company events, so his colleagues began to consider them a couple. At one of these events, a company picnic, Bill said something that made Arch think. "So, Arch, how are things going with you and Elizabeth? You have no idea how happy I am to see you showing interest in someone after all this time." Arch wondered what Bill was talking about, and his puzzled expression prompted Bill to elaborate. "Come on, Arch, it's obvious. We can all see that you're infatuated with Elizabeth. I think that's great. You are a wonderful couple. Bill, I think you misunderstood. Elizabeth and I are good friends, nothing more. Arch, it's me. I see how you behave with her. Even now, you know exactly where she is, and when your eyes meet, your faces light up. I've seen the way she looks at you when you don't notice, and even if you don't want to admit it, you also have this view, although perhaps to a lesser extent. You are a wonderful couple, and I hope everything works out for you. Okay, we'll talk later. There's a queue waiting for me at the water attraction." He is right, Arch thought. Am I really doing this? To test this theory, he searched the area to find Elizabeth, although it seemed like he already knew where she was. When he found her, he watched until she caught his eye, and as Bill said, Elizabeth's face really lit up. Her smile became wider than when she was talking to her friend. If he were honest with himself, he would admit that he too smiled wider, his heart filling with warmth at the contact. Oh my God, Bill is right. I really react to her the same way she reacts to me. Wow, I must be the biggest fool in the world. If Bill can be trusted, and I have no reason not to believe him, everyone thinks we're a couple except me. I wonder how long Elizabeth was going to let me wallow in this ignorance before saying anything. Not being one to put things off until tomorrow, Arch decided to talk to Elizabeth about her feelings and his own. He walked towards where she was talking to one of her employees, a pretty young girl whom Elizabeth was mentoring. "Hello, ladies. Joy, are you enjoying the picnic?" "Oh yes, Arch. Elizabeth and I were just talking about how much fun we're having here. We're going to do a three-legged race later today. I'll definitely come and root for you to win." Arch turned to Elizabeth. "Elizabeth, can I talk to you alone?" Elizabeth apologized to Joy, and together with Arch, they headed to the picnic area and sat down at a table far from the crowd. Elizabeth was concerned about what Arch might want to discuss. He seemed very serious. "Did something happen, Arch?" "No, nothing happened, Elizabeth. I was talking to Bill, and he pointed out something to me. I don't know how to say this, but it seems like I've been pretty inconsiderate towards you and me." "Inattentive? In what sense, Arch?" "Well, he congratulated us on being a couple, and I didn't understand what he was talking about. He kept giving examples that led him to this conclusion, and after our conversation, I decided to check a few things, and he was right." Elizabeth wondered where this would lead, but she hoped it would lead to what she wanted. "What did he say?" "He said that you and I have this special look when we see each other, and that we almost instinctively know where the other is when we're not together." I decided to see if he was right, and he was right. I didn't know exactly where you were in the territory, but I quickly found you because I could almost feel where you were. Then, when our eyes met, your face changed. Your smile grew wider, and your eyes sparkled. I felt my smile widen too, and I felt a warmth in my chest from this contact. Arch paused and took her hand before continuing. "Elizabeth, am I right? Do you care about me as much as I do, even if I was too thick-headed to understand it?" Elizabeth's heart melted at the look of love and admiration in Arch's eyes. It seemed like the moment had come when Arch was ready to admit that he had feelings for her. She would have to thank Bill later for the push that made this possible. "Yes, Arch, I'm really very attached to you. I've been waiting for you to realize this, and I'm very glad that it finally happened. I didn't feel the need to pressure you because I wanted to get to know you better as a friend first. As we grew closer, I felt like we were becoming a couple, even if we didn't admit it. It all happened gradually, and I waited patiently for you to catch up. A man is always the last to know, right? In this case, I think it's not so bad. What's next? I think I need to go on a real date. How about dinner tomorrow night? with dancing after. How do you like it? Elizabeth smiled happily. That would be wonderful. Is 7:30 okay? I need to buy a new dress. That suits me. Now let's go to the playing field and get ready for this race. Arch sat in his office, thinking about the upcoming date. He was really looking forward to this evening. It was surprising how easily he accepted this situation, considering what he had seen in Elisab just yesterday. There is only a good friend and nothing more. How could he not notice the feelings that now seemed so obvious? Was he so insensitive that he could subconsciously fall in love with a woman as wonderful as Elizabeth? Judging by Bill's words, he had been acting like part of a couple for some time without even realizing it. Perhaps Elizabeth had worked her way into his life so subtly that any resistance was simply ignored. If someone had asked him yesterday if he was looking for a relationship, he would have confidently answered, "No, I'm okay with everything." He had wonderful friends at work, both men and women, and he now had a normal relationship with his ex-wife and did not feel any pressing need for anything more. Now that he thought about it, he realized he wanted more. He had sensed something special about Elizabeth from the very first time they met when she was interviewing, although he didn't admit it at the time. There was no one factor that attracted him. It was Elizabeth's integrity that attracted him. They became good friends, and now that romance was added to their relationship, he could see how it could help him. He doesn't have to guess what she likes because they've already discussed their likes and dislikes. He didn't have to worry about the evening being filled with awkward conversations about safe topics, because they had already discussed this, as well as more difficult topics, and enjoyed the conversation, even if they didn't always agree with each other. He knew that he wanted to be with her when they were apart, and that he was happier than he had been in a long time when they were together. No, this evening wouldn't be as awkward as a normal first date, especially for someone his age. He hadn't been on a date in over 20 years, and normally the thought would have terrified him, but not now that he was about to spend the evening with a friend he felt comfortable with. What really bothered him was the physical side of the relationship. He hasn't kissed another woman since he got married. It wasn't the technical aspect of kissing that bothered him, but the fear of disappointing her due to his lack of experience. He really hoped that it was, as they say, like riding a bicycle, and everything would come back to him. As Elizabeth waited patiently for him to realize his feelings, he planned to mostly follow her lead and accommodate her wishes. One thing he knew for sure was that he was not ready for physical intimacy with her. It will take small steps to make him feel comfortable. He also didn't think Elizabeth would want to jump into bed on the first date. It wasn't her style, so he dismissed the thought as something to think about later. Arch arrived at Elizabeth's apartment at 7:25 p.m. He checked his tie in the mirror and, making sure it was straight, got out of the car and headed to her door. Taking a deep breath and once again checking the flowers in his hands, he rang the doorbell. A few seconds later, the door opened, and a picture appeared before him that took his breath away. Elizabeth pulled her hair back and pinned it into a hairstyle that he had never seen her wear before, but that he hoped to see more of. Then he noticed her dress, a classic little black dress that hugged her every curve like a lover's and ended a few inches above her knees. She wore a simple pearl necklace with matching earrings and bracelet to complete the ensemble, and of course, sparkly black high heels. Overall, she was the epitome of beauty. Realizing that he was probably staring, he held out a bouquet of flowers and said, "Wow, Elizabeth, you look amazing. Here, this is for you." Elizabeth used this time to evaluate Arch, and was glad that she was able to make such an impression on him. She put a lot of effort into looking the way she did tonight, and it looks like she was successful. "You look very good too, Arch. I like this suit. And these flowers are beautiful. Please come in while I find a vase for them." She led him into the living room and motioned for him to sit on the sofa. Once she was sure he was comfortable, she quickly grabbed a vase from the kitchen cabinet, filled it with water, and carefully arranged the flowers before returning to the living room and placing the vase on the coffee table in front of Arch. When she returned to the room, Arch stood up and metaphorically pinched himself. He still couldn't believe that this beautiful woman was the one he worked with every day. This didn't mean she wasn't attractive at work, she was, but she clearly dressed more modestly so as not to look too attractive. She didn't feel the need for it tonight, and the difference was amazing. Looking at his watch, Arch noted that it was time to go if they were going to make their order. I don't want to rush it, but we have to go, Elizabeth. Yes, just let me take the stole and we can go. She took the stole from the back of the chair, and Arch helped her drape it over her shoulders. He left the apartment, waited until she had locked the door, and held out his hand to walk her to his car. The walk to the restaurant went quickly, and soon they were sitting at their table in a quiet, secluded corner. This seems like a nice place. Arch, do you come here often? Yes, actually. I've been coming here for business meetings and stuff since they opened about a year ago. I really enjoy the food and privacy these places provide. I can carry on a business conversation without worrying too much, since if people aren't talking too loudly, you really won't hear too much from the other tables. I think the atmosphere here is very romantic, she said with a sly smile. Well, yes, since you brought it up, it's quite romantic. I hope you approve, Arch asked hopefully. Oh yes, Arch, I certainly approve. At that moment, the waiter came over and, having taken their drink orders, left them for them to look at the menu. Returning with their drinks, he took their dinner order and quickly left. You were talking about dancing after dinner, Arch. I haven't danced since Joe retired, and I'm looking forward to it. You dance very well, if I remember correctly, she said flirtatiously. There is dancing in the lounge area starting at 9:00. Arch paused to consider her other comment. Has it really been that long? I apologize, and I promise you won't have to wait another 6 months before I take you dancing again. Of that you can be sure. He laughed. I'll remember this, you know. I just love dancing, so much so that you might regret making that promise. Arch smiled warmly at her and continued in a quiet, sexy voice, I'll take the risk, Elizabeth. These words sent a thrill of desire through her. Arch had never spoken to her like that, and she loved it. She reached out and grabbed his hand. Her eyes darkened as her desire for the man sitting opposite her came to the surface. Arch noticed a change in Elizabeth almost immediately after the words left his mouth. He could almost feel the warmth emanating from her, and her eyes spoke of a previously unexpressed desire for him. Instead of being surprised by the depth of feeling she showed, he was pleased, and it fueled his own desires for her. He hadn't felt this kind of desire in years and found that he liked the feeling. For the first time since the divorce, he felt alive. Elizabeth was releasing feelings he had suppressed for a long time, and it felt wonderful to release them again. All these feelings were passed between the couple without words, and just as Arch leaned in to kiss Elizabeth, their food arrived. Having emerged from the cocoon of desire they were in, they leaned back, embarrassed, and began to eat. The conversation naturally slowed down during the meal, and after dessert they headed to the lounge, taking an empty table near the dance floor. Arch ordered a bottle of wine for them, and they sat down, waiting for the band to finish setting up. Arch poured them both a glass of wine, raised his glass, and proposed a toast. To best friends, he said softly, looking into her eyes. To best friends, she answered with feeling, and they sipped the wine. The evening was spent dancing, enjoying each other's embrace. As soon as the first song ended, Arch and Elizabeth kissed for the first time. Arch's fears of disappointing Elizabeth with his ineptitude were groundless when his lips found hers, and a sensual moan escaped her throat even before his tongue asked permission to enter her mouth. He deepened the kiss and tightened his arms around her waist, feeling her knees buckle slightly. She kissed him back enthusiastically, but it was over all too soon, leaving her breathless as he pulled away. Wow, she said, feeling overwhelmed and unable to formulate a coherent thought. Arch smiled at her lovingly. Yes, wow, I was worried about doing it. I didn't want to be embarrassed by my inability. If it's inability, Arch, I don't think I'll be able to handle it once you gain experience again. You won't hear me complain if your kissing never improves. Thank you, Elizabeth. Your kisses give me the best feelings, so I'm sure my partner has a lot to do with my performance. He pulled her closer to him as the next song began. She pressed herself against his chest, and he laid his cheek on her hair and smelled the scent of her perfume. This intoxicated him and further inflamed the feelings he had for her. During the night, they spent more time on the dance floor than at the table, but found enough time to finish a bottle of wine during the band's breaks. All too quickly, the band's leader announced that the next set would be their last, and they took full advantage of it, dancing every dance. By the end of the evening, it seemed like they had known each other their whole lives, and that they knew each other's bodies as well as they could, with the clothes on them, of course. Given the intensity they had built up over the course of the evening, Arch was beginning to worry that his resolve not to get intimate tonight might be tested. Although he was falling in love quickly, probably already falling in love with Elizabeth, he still didn't want to rush. He didn't want her to think that he, like all men, only thinks about one thing. Oh yes, he wanted that too. He'd be a fool not to. But he wanted her to know that he loved her for who she was, not for her physical attributes. Trusting again what he knew about Elizabeth, he was confident that she would not press the matter tonight, and he took comfort in knowing that. Elizabeth was also thinking about the next step for the evening. She felt like they had made great progress today. She felt his desire for her in everything he did, especially in the way he held her when they danced and when they kissed. No man had ever kissed her like this, and these kisses only strengthened her feelings of love for him. However, she wondered if he might want more, now that she had awakened his desire. She was also looking forward to more, but not today. She'd never been a girl who slept with a guy on the first date, and she wasn't about to start now, no matter how much Arch turned her on. Knowing Arch as she did, she was sure he would understand her reluctance to take this step tonight. Calmed by this, she relaxed, and they slowly drove towards her apartment, each lost in their own thoughts, holding each other's hands. Parking in front of her apartment, Arch moved to the other side of the car and opened the door for her. He gently wrapped his arm around her waist, and they slowly walked towards her door, kissing each other every few steps. When they stopped in front of the door, he turned her towards him and, looking into her eyes, covered her lips with his kiss. In this kiss, he expressed his feelings for Elizabeth without hiding anything. This kiss was more heated than any other they had shared on the dance floor, and all too soon he pulled away, panting. Running his hand over her cheek, he smiled and kissed her forehead. "I hate leaving you, but if I don't, I'll do something that I don't think we're both ready for yet. I had such a great time, and I don't want to ruin it by going too far on the first date. I hope you don't mind, darling." Expensive. He had never used pet names before, but she liked it. She agreed with him and tried to calm him down. "I agree, darling. I had a wonderful evening, and it feels right to end it now. Thank you for being exactly the person I imagined you to be." Expensive. Arch was afraid that she might not like his affectionate address, but she not only accepted it, but also responded with her own. His heart soared, and he knew he had made the right choice tonight, and he was proud that she recognized it too. Kissing her again, not as passionately as before, he pulled away, holding her hands. "I'll call you tomorrow, Elizabeth, if that's okay." "I would really like that, Arch." He let go of her hands and turned to go home, thoughts of the previous evening playing in his head until he fell asleep, dreaming of the best date of his life. Elizabeth woke up early the next morning with thoughts about yesterday's date. It had gone better than she could have hoped, considering that on Saturday she and Arch were still just friends, at least officially. Wearing her sexiest lingerie because it helped her prolong the feelings she was feeling, she put on a blouse and shorts and then headed to the kitchen, preparing breakfast while the coffee dripped into the pot. She tried to read the newspaper while eating, but soon abandoned this idea since all the thoughts in her head were occupied with memories of the past night and the feeling of Arch in her arms and his lips on hers. Her thoughts were interrupted by the phone ringing. "Hello?" she said, hoping it was Arch. "Good morning, Elizabeth," came the smooth tone she had longed to hear. "How are you this morning? Did I sleep well?" "I slept like a baby, Arch." "I'm glad you called early. I wanted to hear your voice," she said shyly. "I'm glad you said that because I was afraid it might be too soon, but I couldn't wait any longer." He paused for a second and, before she could say anything, he continued, "Do you want to go on a picnic in the mountains today? I know a beautiful little field that can be reached by a short path. I'd like to show it to you. A picnic in the meadow, just the two of us, oh yeah. I would love to, Arch. How did you know that I like to walk in the mountains? You mentioned this once, and I remembered it when I was thinking about what to do today. I was almost done preparing the food. I was just waiting for you to say yes before finishing all the preparations. I can be with you in an hour. Is that okay for you? Oh, Arch, I could cook the food, but I appreciate your effort. An hour sounds great. I have a bottle of wine I can take with me if you don't mind. That would be ideal. I don't have any wine at home right now. See you in an hour then. Bye, honey. Bye, Arch. See you soon. Arch lay on his back, looking up at the sky and thinking. He wasn't sure it wasn't a dream. He was so happy. Here he was, next to a beautiful woman, a woman who wanted him as much as he wanted her, and they were alone in a secluded clearing with the sun warming their bodies. They had enjoyed the food he had prepared and the wine she had brought, and now they rested, silently enjoying each other's company. He reached out, found her, and brought her to his lips, kissing each knuckle, then moving up her arm, leaving kisses along the way. He felt her shudder slightly as his mouth touched her hand near her breast, and he paused, enjoying the closeness. Before he could continue his path towards her shoulder, she grabbed his head with her other hand and pulled him to her lips. Unlike last night when he led, today Elizabeth was the aggressor and turned up the heat with her kisses. She attacked his mouth, thrusting her tongue between his lips, exploring his mouth with her flexible tongue. A few minutes later, they walked back to the car and drove quickly but carefully. The road to her house seemed endless. Elizabeth could barely open the door. Her hands were shaking so much that Arch had to take the keys from her before he lost control and attacked her right there in the hallway. "Sorry, did I fall asleep?" Arch asked, smiling shyly. "Just for a few minutes. I don't mind. You worked pretty hard and you deserve a quick nap," she said, running her finger down his chest. "I just don't want you to think that I'm the kind of man who makes love to a woman and then turns away and falls asleep. I enjoy the intimacy afterwards, almost as much as a woman, I think," he said thoughtfully. "Believe me, we had a wonderful time afterwards," she said with a playful smile. Elizabeth looked into Arch's face and saw the love he had for her reflected in his eyes, and her breath caught in her throat, tears involuntarily rolling down her cheeks. Arch saw the tears and wondered if he had said something wrong. "Expensive? Are you okay?" he asked carefully. Elizabeth wiped the tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand and pressed herself against his chest, grabbing his head in her hands and peppering his face with kisses. She kissed the tip of his nose, then pulled away slightly. "I'm fine, honey. It's just been so long since I've felt this way. So long since someone told me they loved me that I got a little overwhelmed with emotion. Please don't worry. I'm so happy I could burst. I love you, Arch. I love you so much, and I thank God for bringing you into my life. I need to thank God for bringing you to me. I never thought I could feel this way for a woman again after." He paused, not wanting to talk further. "SHH, I know you don't need to say more. I felt the same way. After my husband and I separated, I almost lost hope that I would find another man whom I could love. I was sure that I could never trust a man again after what he did, and for many years I didn't even try. Then the years went by, and no one I met interested me. I thought all the good guys were already taken, so I stopped looking. Even when I met you and started having those old feelings again, I didn't take them seriously because you weren't interested," she said quietly. "I didn't show it," he said guiltily. "I think I was still too worried to try again. It took me a long time to get out of this state. I'm just glad you didn't give up on me. I can be quite stubborn sometimes, and I shudder to think that I might have missed out on this if you decided that I wouldn't change. You had nothing to worry about. I knew you were worth it, and since I've been single for 10 years, giving you time wasn't that big of a deal," she said with a cheeky smile. "Come to your senses, huh?" He laughed. "Well, that's probably true. I still have Bill to thank for opening my eyes. I don't know how much longer I would have remained in the dark without his prodding. It wouldn't take long, Arch. I was going to be more obvious about my attraction pretty soon, she said, smiling. The relationship between Arch and Elizabeth developed quickly after that first day. They spent most of their free time together at his or her place, doing everything that couples do when they are alone. At this stage of his life, Arch knew himself well and felt that he knew Elizabeth well, so thoughts of marriage soon began to enter his mind. He chose a ring he was sure she would like, but also made arrangements with the jeweler to exchange if necessary, and made an order at the restaurant where they had their first date. They were seated at the same table, and they chatted animatedly throughout dinner. After dessert was finished, and before they were about to move into the dance lounge, Arch pulled a small blue box from his pocket. Kneeling down in front of her, he opened the box. Looking her straight in the eyes, he asked, "Will you marry me, Elizabeth?" Elizabeth saw the beautiful ring sparkling in the box, and her heart began to pound in her chest. She had to swallow several times before she could find her voice. "Yes, oh yeah, I'll marry you, Arch." She threw her arms around his neck, squeezing so hard that he thought she would break his neck. He took the ring out of the box and put it on her finger, and it fit perfectly. They were interrupted by the applause of the other restaurant patrons, to which they responded by blushing. They headed to the lounge where they found a bucket of champagne on their table, kindly provided by the restaurant management. The rest of the evening passed quickly, and they left early to continue the celebration at her home. Arch woke up early Saturday morning, the light from the window filtering through the curtains. He remembered the last few months of his life and still couldn't believe his luck. After the last dark years of his marriage and the dark years after his divorce, he never thought he would be this happy again. He felt truly blessed that love had found him twice in his life. However, there was one thing that clouded his happiness. He had to tell Dee about his engagement, and he wasn't looking forward to it. He needed to tell her in person. He owed her that after everything they had been through together, since he felt that she still hoped that they could be together again. Oh, she never said anything like that when they occasionally had lunch together or when he saw her at Bernie and Deborah's events, but he could see something that he interpreted as hope in her eyes, especially when she was talking to her sister, and he could see but not hear them. He didn't want to hurt her with this news, but he also didn't want her to find out about it secondhand. It had to be done, and it had to be done soon. On Monday at work, Elizabeth will definitely say something to her friends, and then the secret will become clear. He sighed and continued to look at the ceiling. Elizabeth woke up slowly, looking him on my left ring. The ring that Arch had put on her finger last night. It still felt like a dream to her, and she didn't want to move on. She heard the man next to her sigh and turned her head to see Arch staring at the ceiling, clearly lost in thought. "Good morning, dear. Is something wrong?" she asked carefully. Arch turned to see his fiancée looking at him with concern on her face. He needed to quickly dispel that look. "No, honey, everything is fine. I was just thinking about what I need to do that I'm not looking forward to." "I need to tell Dee about our engagement," he said quietly. "About?" she asked with curiosity in her voice. "Yes, I feel like I have to tell her this. We had many years together, and she shouldn't find out about it through rumors. I'm just not looking forward to it. How can you tell your ex-wife that you are getting married again? Hey, Dee, congratulate me. Am I getting married?" "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "You're a good person, Arch. Most men wouldn't think about their ex-wife's feelings at all. You'll think of something to tell her about this as gently as possible. I know you will. Thank you for your support, dear. I'll need moral support. I'll call her later today and invite her to lunch tomorrow, if that's okay." "Of course, no problem. I'll have you for the rest of the day and the rest of our lives, so I can let you go to lunch tomorrow. I think I'll take Joy to lunch too. I don't think I can wait until Monday to show off." "That's a good idea, Elizabeth. But please ask Joy to keep this a secret until Monday. I want to spend a quiet Sunday with you before all our friends find out. You know we won't have a moment's peace once the rumors start spreading. By the way, do you have a preference for the wedding date?" "To be honest, Arch, I didn't have a chance to think about it. You proposed just last night, and then we spent the whole night dancing and making love. My mind was a little busy. she said with a smile to soften her words. Sorry, honey, I just thought I'd ask since it popped into my head. My preference is the sooner the better, so whatever you choose will work for me. I'll think about it and tell you, dear. Will you join me in the shower? She asked with a smile that hinted at more than just a shower. I'll be there in a minute, honey. I'll wash your back and something else. It was 12:55 and Arch was sitting at a table in a trendy outdoor cafe. He looked at his watch for the third time in 3 minutes, realizing that time was passing too slowly for him. Just as he was looking at his watch again, he noticed the head waiter directing Dee to his table. He stood up and pulled out a chair for her. Sitting back down, he began. Thanks for coming, Dee. I appreciate you agreeing to meet for such a short time, he said more nervously than he would have liked. Dee noticed the tension on his face and heard it in his voice and began to worry. Despite their separation, Dee still knew him well enough to know that he had something important to say, and she was sure she wouldn't like it. Putting a smile on her face, she thought about what it could be. No problem, Arch. You know, I love our lunches together, she said. She assumed that whatever he had to say wouldn't be good news, so she decided not to delay. You look nervous, Arch. Is this something I did? Leave it to Dee to notice how nervous he was and want to get straight to the point. No, Dee, that's not what you did. I have something I want to tell you. I didn't want you to find out this from someone else. I owe you this. He paused, looked into her eyes, and took a breath to collect his thoughts before continuing. I'm getting married, Dee. He's getting married, she thought. The last thing she expected to hear today was this. Despite all her attempts not to admit it to herself, she still hoped that one day Arch would change his mind and return to her. Deborah mentioned this several times. Arch just needed to get over the pain she caused him. Once he can get over it, he will miss her and realize how much she has changed. How much she was against the woman he married and not the vixen he divorced. Her hopes rose slightly when they resumed their communication, even though Arch had made it clear that their relationship was purely friendly. Now her hopes were shattered, and she had to restrain herself not to cry. She herself is to blame for this. Worse, she caused it to him. She hurt him so much that his love for her could not overcome the pain. Realizing that she had been silent for too long, she decided to congratulate him, although this was the last thing she wanted to do. Reaching across the table, she placed her hand on his. Congratulations, Arch, I'm happy for you. Who is this happy woman? Arch could see that despite her calm appearance, Dee was upset, but he didn't expect anything else. As he suspected, she had held out hope for their reconciliation, and now that hope was dashed. Despite his joy over his situation, he still felt bad about her. Her name is Elizabeth Cann. She is the chief financial officer at a medical center. We've been dating for a while now, and I've decided it's time to move on, but not before telling you. I appreciate your concern for my feelings, Arch. You always took care of me, even when I didn't deserve it. You are a wonderful man, Arch, and my biggest regret is losing you because of my own stupidity. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she refused to cry. It would do nothing but make Arch feel bad, and he didn't deserve that. She lowered her head for a moment to collect her thoughts. When is the wedding, and will I be invited? She said with a forced smile. We haven't set a date yet, and yes, you're invited if you want to come, he said quietly. I want it, Arch, I want it. You have been kind to me all these years, and as your friend, I want to share your joy with you, she said sincerely. Arch had been curious about one thing for a long time, and now seemed like the right time to satisfy his curiosity. Dee, can I ask you a question? This is a little personal. You can ask, but I may not answer. It depends on how personal it is. Fair. He paused and looked into her eyes, hoping that she would see the sincerity in his gaze. Di, why did you break off your engagement with that British guy? I've always been interested in this. Did you look so happy in the photo that was published in the newspaper? Of all the possible questions, this was the last one she could have expected. Should she tell him? Yes, he deserves to know, especially after he arranged a special meeting to think about her feelings. It's difficult, Arch. At first, I was fascinated. Trevor was very charming and confident. I had met him a few weeks earlier at a party Deborah had dragged me to. We were introduced, and he immediately caught my attention, spending the entire evening with me. We saw each other almost every day, you know. He was rich, and we ate in the best restaurants, attended lavish parties, and he gave me many expensive gifts. I was stunned, to say the least. Deborah also thought he was a great option for me and said I would be stupid if I stopped dating him. She paused to take a sip of water. His proposal at that party was a complete surprise. Everyone congratulated me and seemed so happy for me that I didn't think much about the whole situation before saying yes. It was then that the photographer took the photo that ended up in the newspaper. The next day I realized reality. I didn't know Trevor that well. He was a very pleasant person, attractive, of course, an excellent match, but I did not love him. I hope this doesn't sound weird, but I've been in love once before, and it wasn't the same feeling. She lowered her head, and her body shook. Gathering her courage, she raised her head, straightened her shoulders, and continued. When I realized this, the solution became simple. I called Trevor the next day and told him I couldn't marry him. He was depressed because he really loved me, falling in love at first sight. I told him I didn't feel the same about him. He asked if I could fall in love with him over time and suggested I wait. I was honest with him and told him that I didn't think I could love him, and it wouldn't be fair to drag him along with me. I used the excuse that I didn't want to move to England and leave my friends behind, since the topic hadn't come up before I agreed, but Trevor knew the truth. He returned to England the following week, and I never saw him again. I'm sorry to hear that, Dee. You deserve to find love too. I hope you find someone who loves you soon. Arch squeezed the hand she had placed on him at the beginning of their conversation, letting her know that he felt her pain, and that he was serious about his words that she deserved to be happy. In an effort to lighten the atmosphere, he called the waiter, and they continued their meal as friends. Arch stood at the altar in the church with Bernie Green, waiting for his bride to appear. He looked around at his friends and relatives, nodding in greeting when he caught their gaze. He was surprised but pleased to see that Dee had clearly come with a beau. He didn't know how serious it was, and it didn't matter. It seemed to him that this was progress for Dee, that she had at least started dating. His attention was drawn to the back of the church by the sounds of a wedding march. His beautiful bride stood there, arm in arm with her father. To the sound of music, she walked towards him and their future. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even click to the next one.